Recording, so I just hit record. My name is Katie Wysocki, and I serve as the Assistant Director in the Career Enrichment Network here in the College of the Liberal Arts. Jenna Spinelli is joining us today. Jenna loves a good story and has spent the past 15 years telling them as a journalist, marketing professional, and most recently as a podcaster. She is the communications specialist for the McCourtney Institute for Democracy at Penn State, where she hosts and produces the Democracy Works podcast in collaboration with WPSU, Central Pennsylvania's NPR station. She is also the founder of the Democracy Group, a network of podcasts about civic engagement, civil discourse, and democracy. When she's not podcasting, Jenna plans and executes all of the McCourtney Institute's external communications. She also teaches journalism in Penn State's Donald P. Belisario College of Communications and works with national and international clients as a freelance writer and marketer. Jenna, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your expertise on this topic and your vast understanding across the university of resources as well as communication styles. So thank you so much, and I'm going to let you take it away. Please, for the audience, you are welcome to put in questions through the Q&A or chat. I will be moderating those and we'll ask them of Jenna after her presentation.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie, for the introduction and for the opportunity to give this presentation today. And thank you to everybody who is tuning in today for taking another voluntary hour on Zoom. I continue to be amazed and impressed and grateful when folks show up to these virtual events. So today we are going to talk about getting started as a freelance writer. It's something that I think isn't talked about enough in the college context. As you all well know, the focus tends to be a lot on getting a full-time job, landing that first job after you graduate. And there is, of course, absolutely nothing wrong with that. I hope all of you are able to land that job if that's the path you want to take. However, there is another path, I think, that is worth pursuing and worth discussing and worth thinking about, and that's the route of being a freelancer, either as a full-time basis, being a full-time freelancer, or as what's called a side hustle, which is something that you do in addition to your day job, so to speak. And that's primarily where I've built my career in freelancing. As Katie said, I do have a full-time job at Penn State, but my degree is in journalism, and that's always been a passion of mine. And I've been able to keep a lot of those writing and editing and interviewing skills fresh as a result of the freelance work that I've done. So I'm going to talk to you today about how to think about the world of freelance writing, some of the different kind of content opportunities that are out there, as well as some resources and some best practices if this is something that you think you might like to pursue. But we'll start off just with some numbers and the big picture. So as I said, I've been doing this since 2008. I am very old. I feel older every day. So I hope that my years of experience will be beneficial. But some numbers to start off. There are 57 million freelancers in the US, which is a lot. So if you think about the US has something like 330 million people, that's what, a fifth, a sixth, something like that of the US population does freelance work in some capacity. And you might think that's a lot of people freelancing, and it is, but there's also a big world out there, like a big content beast that needs to be fed. I mean, think about all of the things that you read every day, whether it's a social media post that goes by in your feed, maybe a blog or an article that you read somewhere, a video that you watch, something on YouTube or TikTok or what have you. That's all content that someone created, like somebody actually put in the work to do that. And increasingly, the people that do that are freelancers, whether it's people working for themselves as influencers or that type of thing, or people that companies hire to help with this work on sort of a contract basis. It's maybe not not quite enough work, or the company's budget doesn't justify doing these things as a full-time position. So they're increasingly looking to freelancers. And in fact, there are 2 million blog posts published every day. So just about every company these days has a blog post. Blog posts rank very well on Google for search engine optimization. So it's what's called organic content. It's a way to kind of advertise what you do in a more indirect way and get Google's attention. So when people are searching for, various terms, your article from your company's website comes up high in the search results, and maybe leads to someone signing up for your newsletter, or following you on social media, or engaging with you in some other way. It kind of starts this marketing funnel, so to speak. And by the way, all those other pieces I mentioned, newsletters and e-commerce types of things, all that is also an opportunity for freelance content writing. There's just this, like I said, this big beast that needs to be fed, because it's a growing industry. About more than half of all businesses in the US use this approach called content marketing to reach their audience. So content marketing is giving people like a little bit of information that's not directly related to whatever the product is, or the service is that you're selling. But there is the ultimate goal, of course, is to convert someone in, whatever fashion makes the most sense for that business. So we'll talk more about that in just a little bit here. So, I think there's two main questions you need to think about right now as a college student. What role do you want freelance writing to play in your life? Is it something that you want to make a run at doing full time? Is it something that you might still like to do on the side? Are there ways that you can, use freelancing like I did to leverage skills that you have that you might not get to use otherwise, or maybe to develop new skills that you're not learning right now in your academic program? So for example, I know some of you out there might be English majors or CAS majors and have an interest in journalism. As much as I love Belsario, you don't actually need to be a journalism major to do journalism work. So there's an opportunity there for you if you do want to try your hand at journalism, but you've gone another route with your major. There's nothing stopping you from still writing journalism type of articles, particularly on a freelance basis. The other question you have to ask is, what kind of writing do you want to do? Do you want to do journalism? Do you want to do content marketing? Do you want to try to make money on essays or opinion type of pieces? Do you want to be a copy editor? Do you want to put those skills to use? And there are lots of options. This slide doesn't really even cover all of them. Not to mention getting into things like podcasting or video creation. That could be a whole separate talk that I could maybe give some time for this group. But the four buckets here is really how I think about it, and these are not mutually exclusive. I have done some combination of all four of these throughout my career. So it's not like you have to just say, okay, I want to work in content marketing, so I can never do a personal essay or do journalism or do copy editing. And in fact, most professional writers today, earn a living doing some combination of all of these things. They probably have one that they gravitate to or are more passionate about, but at the end of the day, when it comes to paying the bills, especially doing this as a full-time thing, you need to be flexible about what type of work you take on. If you're doing it on the side, you can be a little pickier about what types of work you do or don't want to take on. But just to recap, again, content marketing is blog posts, articles, case studies, which is using an example of a success story that a particular customer or client had using a business. White papers are more research focused, like here's an overview of this particular part of this particular industry. And you get a lot of kind of factual information. And then at the end, there's usually some kind of call to action about joining a mailing list or scheduling a sales call or something like that. Journalism, again, fairly self-explanatory, going out and doing interviews. There's a whole world of freelance journalism and online, sites and newsletters and Substacks and all of these sorts of things. Personal essays are again things that you write, or maybe opinion pieces, like the hot take, so to speak. Like if you have an informed opinion about something in the news or something in pop culture, you might be able to get paid to have that article published somewhere, or start your own thing and publish it yourself in some ways that we'll talk about here in a bit. And then of course all this writing can benefit from some good editing. So there's lots of opportunities to do editing as well. So just to dig in and look at some examples here, just so you're clear about what exactly I mean by content marketing and journalism and essays. So this post is from a company called Tuft and Needle, which is actually founded by a Penn State alum. And so if you look at this is their blog. They call it Nightcap, which is kind of cute, right? But this article is about, and I should say, Tuft and Needle makes mattresses, if you haven't gotten that already from this. But they wrote this article, How Long Should a Nap Be? Now that seems like something that people would probably Google, right? Some of you might have even Googled this, or something like that, right? So the idea is that if someone Googles this, they're going to land on this Tuft and Needle post. And then, there's no real direct sell necessarily that you should buy their mattress, but you get a little bit of information, and, you might get to click around the site and see, what products they have, or something like that. And, kind of implied is that, no matter how long your nap is, it's going to be way more restful on a Tuft and Needle bed than it would be on any other mattress that you might have. So this type of content is huge, particularly in the direct to consumer market. So, all these brands that you don't go to a traditional store to buy, you just, buy them right on their website. You probably see their ads all over Instagram and things like that. This is huge. And then I mentioned case studies before. So this is something where, again, you're telling kind of a success story, but you have to, talk to these people and do interviews and write the content in a compelling way. So this is a good opportunity to use some of those more creative writing skills, because some of these things can be pretty bland and pretty dry, right? So it's your job to kind of spice it up and make it something people actually want to read. So lots of opportunities for that type of writing as well. And then journalism, just so we're all clear here, it's usually something that's based on interviews that you conduct or other reporting that you do, background research, etc. And in the freelance world, it's usually an idea that's pitched to an editor at a specific publication. So in the world of content marketing, the clients or the company you're working for may come up with the idea and say, okay, we want a blog post about this. In that Tuft and Needle example, I don't know if it was, whose idea it was to write that post about how long a nap should be, but in content marketing, it is more likely to be the client that comes up with the idea, and it's your job to execute. Whereas in journalism, you come up with the idea and then pitch it to a publication that is in that particular niche. So to take a look at what this looks like, this is a story from Outside magazine, which covers a lot of things in like the wilderness, adventure, outdoor world. There's this place called Brooklyn Boulders, which aims to diversify the rock climbing worlds there. And this is part of a bigger trend that's happening in the entire outdoor industry. It's not just for like upper class white people who shop at Patagonia. It can really be much more diverse and inclusive. So this writer, Molly Taft, pitched this idea to an editor at Outside. They agreed upon a rate and commissioned the story. Then she went out and did all the reporting and the research and worked with Outside's editors to have it published. And then one more example here to look at in essays and opinion pieces. Medium is a big place to think about if you do want to publish things that are more under your own opinion. A lot of news sites or magazines, places like Outside that we were just looking at, they don't commission opinion pieces very often from freelancers. They tend to have writers on staff who have regular columns and things like that. So if you do want to get something out there that's sort of more your own experience, I would definitely recommend creating a Medium account and either posting it as yourself under your own account or pitching it. There's lots of different publications on Medium as well. But this is just an essay about someone who decided to randomly call up her friends during the early days of COVID, and how much of a breath of fresh air that was for her. And GEN is a publication on Medium, again, that accepts pitches from writers. So the other big question here is, how much does it pay? How much can you realistically make from this? So the pay structure, again, is different depending on what type of work you're doing. Content marketing tends to be more hourly, although sometimes there are fixed price contracts. But if you're a beginner starting out, you can think about something along the lines of like a minimum wage, $15 an hour. And then going to $50, $100 an hour or more for experienced professionals, people who have really honed a skill set or expertise in a particular area. Journalism tends to be more of a per word structure or a flat rate for an entire story. So the example that we looked at from Outside Magazine about Brooklyn boulders, that writer was probably paid somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 a word for the story. I don't know how many words it was, but she probably made about $1,000 off of that. That's before taxes, which we'll talk about here shortly. So that's that structure. And then essays or opinion can really be either of these things. It really depends on what you're talking about. If it's an idea you're pitching to an outlet, it'll probably be a per word type of thing. If you get kind of a regular column somewhere, that might be something that's more per hour, but that kind of depends again on what you're looking at. Medium pays its default. You can put your stories behind Medium's paywall, and they have an algorithm that determines how much you get paid based on how many views it gets. So just a couple of tips and best practices, and these apply regardless of what type of writing you're doing. As I was just saying, the more specialized your skills are, the more you can develop a niche that you work in, the more you can charge for those skills. Now, you might be wondering, well, how do I figure out what my niche is? How do I figure out what I'm interested in? That is a great question. And actually, the subject of a course I'm going to be teaching this fall for Belisario, all about independent content creation and how to figure out, how to marry what your interests are versus what there's demand for in the market. So it might be your academic discipline. Maybe it's something that you've, maybe it's, I don't know, if you are a classics major, right? Maybe there's some particular area there that you really gravitated toward, or maybe it's some form of literature, or who knows. But it can really be anything, and you can absolutely put in the work to make yourself an expert, whether through doing your own research or doing interviews with other people. You can sort of build up an expertise. For me, I have a couple of niches I would say that I write in. I write a lot about podcasting for various podcasting industry publications. I write about higher education because I work in higher ed. I write about democracy and kind of political topics because, again, that's part of my day job too. So you need to also be curious. And this applies to coming up with story ideas, or even ideas for blog posts to write, and also to figuring out what that niche is going to be, right? So you have to you have to develop that sense of curiosity, which again is easier said than done. There's no real magic bullet for it other than just trying to read as much as you can and consume information in different media and think about the ways that you might put them together in what you're doing. um, no matter what kind of writing it is you're doing, you want to make sure that you're clear about what the client is looking for, and that you set a realistic timeline for meeting those expectations. You need to, I think, under promise and over deliver. So whenever I accept an assignment, I always give myself at least a week of padding, because life happens, things get in the way. But if I say to somebody, oh, I'll have this to you by March 15th, and I actually turn it in on March 10th, that gives them 5 extra days, and it kind of boosts me up a little bit in their eyes. So I think it's really good if you can plan that way or think about that in your planning. You don't want to be throwing something together at the last minute. It's one thing to do that for a class assignment that has one set of consequences, but when you're getting paid for that work, it's something completely different. You don't want to be, having an editor send something back to you with sloppy mistakes, or have it not be what the client's looking for, and then they're up against their deadline, and all these things add up, and it makes it more likely that you're not going to get a repeat business, or that they're not going to hire you again, or they might not read your pitch email the next time it comes through. And it is easy, I think, to get caught up in like the thrill of the chase and want to take on too much. This is especially true on gig economy platforms. I worked a lot on a site called Upwork, which is a freelance marketplace. And that just has jobs come up, like just a big feed of freelance gigs you can bid on. And so it's easy, particularly there, to sort of get caught up and take on more than you can chew. And then finally, it's important to keep in mind that unlike other types of jobs, payment for freelance work is not always immediate. The industry standard is net 30. So that means you don't get paid until 30 days after you submit your invoice to the client. And you might not submit your invoice until a week or two after you complete whatever it is you were writing. So it can be a long time before you get paid. So you just need to plan for that up front. Freelancers are also independent contractors, so you need to set aside about a quarter of what you earn for taxes when it comes time to file those. So that's really important to think about as you're weighing, how much to charge or how much a client is offering you. It's not like if they pay you $500 to write 5 blog posts, you're going to just get $500 in your pocket. You have to set aside some of that for taxes, and you might not get it until like 2 months after you've completed the work. So those are just things to keep in mind as you're beginning to navigate this world. And so just to wrap up here before we look at some resources, and I'm happy to then take your questions. It is difficult, but not impossible, to make a living as a full-time freelancer. I think, I don't know about you, but when I was in school and conjuring like the image of a freelancer, it's somebody who just got to travel and talk to celebrities and like do all these glamorous things, and sit in a coffee shop and work. And of course that piece of it doesn't happen as much these days. So travel and coffee shops and all that. But media budgets are shrinking, and there's on the one hand, like I said, there is more content that needs to be fed, but there's also less and less of a market to pay for it. So it's a tricky landscape, and it can take a while to really get the lay of the land. But everybody that I know who is a full-time freelancer really has to hustle at it. Like, you have to be very entrepreneurial about promoting your work, always hustling to get sources and come up with gigs and piece things together, and really promoting yourself too, like making sure you're active on social media so you can build up a following. There are platforms like Substack, which is a fairly new site for newsletters, that independent content creators can go to make money that way by starting their own newsletters. But again, you only get money if you build up a following, and so you have to have that base from somewhere. And then, you have to think about things like job security versus the freedom to write or do or go where you want. So what's more important to you? Are you the type of person who is going to like gouge your eyes out if you have to sit at a desk, whether that's in an office or working from home, and do assignments that someone else gives you? Or do you value the security that comes from having a steady paycheck? Although I was just listening to someone talk about this the other day, and I hadn't really thought of it this way, but this gentleman who is a full-time freelancer said that in some ways freelancing is more secure because you're in control of how much money you earn. You can always go out and get more work. Whereas if you have a job and you get laid off, like, what are you going to do? You're sort of out of luck and have to start from scratch. So again, it's all about trade-offs. And I think for me, and maybe for you, a side hustle is a good way to marry the two or to get started. You can kind of dip your toe in the water even now while you're still a student. You don't necessarily have all those, looming things of, bills to pay and all those, health insurance and all these things. You can kind of, get your foot in the door and get yourself established before those like real world concerns start to kick in. So just a couple of resources here that I look to a lot, and I'll share these slides with Katie so that she can send them out to all of you. We won't go through all of these, but so for journalism, I really like the Opportunities of the Week newsletter. It's just as the name suggests, it's a bunch of pitch calls sourced from Twitter, sourced from various industry sites that this woman, Sonia Weiser, who is an independent journalist, puts together. There's at least 30 or 40 in every issue that comes out. So all types of opportunities there. Freelancing with Tim is a great resource, particularly for how to pitch editors, both for journalism and opinion pieces. Excuse me. Tim is an editor at the style section of the New York Times. So he thinks a lot about lifestyle content and that type of stuff. So he has his own Substack. Laura Briggs works a lot in content marketing and has a great book called The Six-Figure Freelancer. Laura helped me develop a class that I taught at Penn State the past 2 semesters, and just as a wealth of knowledge about all things freelance writing. Study Hall is a great cooperative of freelance writers, so people kind of helping each other out, sharing gigs, sharing sources, editing each other's work, collaborating, all those kind of things. And then the American Society of Journalists and Authors is a trade group for freelance writers, and that covers both journalism and content marketing. And so they have conferences, they have an editor directory, a freelancer directory, different ways that you can network with potential clients as well. So I know I just threw a lot at you. If you have questions or if you want to learn more about any of these things, you can feel free to email me, or you can find me on social media at Jenna Spinelli. And with that, and I guess I'll just give one more plug. In the fall, I am teaching COM 297. It's a 1 credit seminar on independent content creation. So we're going to look at people who have built successful content-based businesses in particular niches. So climate change, the music industry, social media platforms, people who cover these different beats, how they figured out what they want to write about, how they developed their audience and built up their expertise, and how you can figure out what your area of focus or your area of specialty might be. So look for that when the fall schedule comes out. It'll be COM 297. But otherwise, I am happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Jenna. I was actually going to ask you to plug your course. I figured we'd have some interest here. So The first question that came in, and as I'm going to echo what Jenna said, once I have her slides, I will definitely send them to all of you with the registration list. So you'll see those soon. So the first question was, what about technical writing in the freelance world?
Yeah, so I think of technical writing as sort of on the same plane as content marketing, except it doesn't necessarily have as much of a creative focus. It can, and it's really broad too. I mean, technical writing can be everything from user guides and manuals to documentation for very specific processes. It can either be internally focused or external. So it might be something that only people within a company see, or it could be something that's shared with customers or users. Um, I think a lot of those opportunities generally come about the same way that content marketing gigs do, and that's through, what I tell students a lot is that if you are if you're interested in this type of thing, and you don't have any experience, pick your favorite company. Pick, maybe it's Tuft and Needle, to use that example. Like, look at their blog, see what type of stuff they write about, and write something of your own so that you have a sample to send to someone when you are thinking about a gig, or if you see an opening for a contributor or a post on a site like Upwork or one of the resources that were in the slides. You have something you can send. You have some type of social proof that you can send. Even better if you make your own website and can publish it there, or publish it on Medium if it makes sense to do that. Then it's not just like a Word document that you're sending. It's actually been published on the internet somewhere. It's out there in the world. So I think the same largely holds true for technical writing. Pick something in your everyday life that is difficult to use, and if you were going to like explain to your grandma how to do it, what kind of documentation would you put together, and do it. And that's really, I think it's one thing to say you're interested in something, but it's something else entirely to actually have the work to back it up. And that shows both your writing skills, but also like your intuitiveness, your entrepreneurial spirit to sort of go after it and put it together, even though there's no real direct, you're not going to actually probably publish that thing anywhere.
How important is a portfolio, Jenna, on some of these websites like the Upworks and Medium, to get work? What those are all great ideas to get started, absolutely. But is there any content from their academic careers that they can be sharing to get gigs or work?
Yeah, I mean, how I typically think about that and advise students is to, like, you can certainly use the core of an academic paper that you write, but maybe change the framing of it or change the tone of it a little bit. So rather than like a 5-page paper about um, communism in 18th century Russia, like maybe you just make it a little bit more of an op-ed about your kind of your thoughts on that, right? Or you sort of just make the language a little bit lighter, like take out the footnotes, take out the literature review, and really just focus on like the meat of the content. And what's something that if you were just scrolling through on social media, like how would you need to frame that article or that paper to make it interesting and something that somebody would want to click on, and kind of use that as your guide. So you can still, I think, keep some of the same tone or some of the same kind of nuts and bolts of your academic work, but just give it a new spin.
Sounds good. So we can't just throw papers up and
Right.
hope it works out. Okay, I have another question. How do you recommend, and you've kind of touched upon this a bit, but how do you recommend starting to network with people in the freelancing world?
Yeah, so the American Society of Journalists and Authors is a great group. They have a Facebook group that's fairly active. The Society of Professional Journalists, again, is also active on social media. A lot of those groups that I had up on my slides, like Study Hall, they all have Slack communities and newsletters you can subscribe to just see kind of what people are talking about. And then just introduce yourself and say hello, that you're a freelancer looking to make some connections. And I should say too that a lot of resources have special discounts or are in some cases free to students. So now is a great time to start taking advantage of those things. There's also a ton of social media groups. I'm most familiar with ones on Facebook. If you just search freelance writing groups on Facebook, you'll find lots that you can kind of see both people looking to hire and looking to kind of put their services out there. And then Upwork is free for anyone to join, and you can make your portfolio on there and start applying to jobs that way as well. And Medium is also free to join. So I would say the most important thing you can do is just spend some time looking around at all of these things and really get a good lay of the land before you just dive right in and start trying to get work right away.
Perfect. A student says that my major is English. Am I able to work at Penn State news companies like Onward State? Do you have any tips or suggestions? And just from my perspective, I would say that Onward State or the Collegian are hiring any major. So more than likely, yes. But do you have any tips or suggestions for those Penn State resources? And I know there's also quite a few within the College of Communications too.
Yeah, so I don't know the specifics about the Belisario student organizations, if they're open to students outside of Belisario, but I would say just ask. There's, Valley Magazine, there's PSN TV and Center County Report, there's Comp Radio. But those aside, I think that the ones you were talking about, Katie, the Collegian, Onward States, those types of places, they all have regular tryout processes that typically occur at the start of every semester. So you'll usually have to write a sample article of some sort, and then there's an interview process that you go through. But that said, I think the same thing applies. Just reach out and say, hey, look, I know you probably had tryouts already for this semester, but I'm interested in getting involved. Is there anything I can do right now? And maybe we're coming up on the start of the summer session, so maybe you can kind of get in on the ground floor early to start working for some of these places over the summer.
I would point out too, this is a great career for any major. And Jenna spoke to that as well, that it's not just a journalism major from Belisario College of Communication. They're looking, especially in that content matter, right? They're looking for that expertise, that the diversity and background that many of our liberal arts students have. So I wouldn't cut yourself short based on major, for sure. So I have one more question in the chat. So I'll encourage students who are here, if they have any others, to please add them in. This question, the info on this webinar mentioned how to pitch story ideas to publications. How is this done, and where does one look for that information or instruction?
Yeah, so the resources that I shared at the end, the opportunities of the week and study hall and freelancing with Tim, they all have regular pitch calls, as well as databases of editors and publications. Most sites, if you just look, it's usually somewhere under the About Us or the Contact Us. They have information about how and when they accept submissions. Every outlet has a different cycle. Some are quarterly, some are monthly, some just published on an ongoing basis. So if we went to the Outside magazine website, for example, you can find on there how they work with freelancers and who to send articles to. But honestly, a lot of it happens through Twitter as well. There's a big freelance writing Twitter. So if again, if there's a particular niche or a particular outlet that you're interested in, look and see who the editors are. You can usually find those on the website, then see if any of them are on Twitter, or even the writers for that publication, and follow them on Twitter. And they often put out pitch calls on Twitter as well when they're looking to commission pieces.
So I'm gonna have two questions in the chat, and one's a great one to end on. But a little bit more about the portfolio. The student is asking, what does it look like? Should we create multiple kinds of content at random? And how should we go about creating that from scratch? I think
Mhm.
talked about a couple things, but any more
Yeah, I mean,
details on that?
yeah, I think you can easily take the same idea and have multiple types of content around it. So, um, let's say again that you pick Tuft and Needle as your company that you want to write the sample blog post for. So maybe you write that, how long should a nap be type of post. That's, I don't know, maybe 400, 500 words. But then you take that and you make a shorter post that might be more apt for like a Twitter thread, or to refashion with graphics and Instagram story, or something like that. Maybe you write a longer like white paper type of thing, which is like the science of naps, and you find information from experts. Maybe you source some of the testimonials on the Tuft and Needle website and put them together in a case study about one of their particular products and how it's helped someone. So it really depends on, or if you want to be in journalism, if you want to go that route, maybe you go out and do your own reporting on a particular topic that you're interested in, and compile your story that way. Or you write an opinion piece about the best nap you've ever had in your life, and why it was so great, and all those kind of things. So you could just, I could keep spitballing about this stuff all day, but I think it's the more variety you have, the better. And also think about what type of writing it is that you ultimately want to do, and then create samples that are in that vein.
Thank you. The question I have remaining is, can I make a virtual appointment with you? I'd like to think he's talking to me, but I think he's talking to you. So I'm going to steal that and say, yes, all of you can make career coaching appointments with any of us in the Career Enrichment Network through Nittany Lion Careers. But Jenna, would you be interested in any one-on-ones with the students?
Yeah, sure. Send me an email. I don't always have a ton of time, but I do definitely fit them in where I can. So definitely send me an email if you're interested.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Any more questions from the student audience? All right. Well, Jenna, thank you again so much. I love doing this with you, and I love this topic and bringing it to the College of Liberal Arts. So I appreciate it very much.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Katie, and thanks again, everybody, for being here.
Absolutely. See you later.
Bye.